Hello, welcome to the final diary for Fires of Heaven, Book 5 of the Wheel of Time. This is the last one of these I'm doing because I finally finished the book. After 7 weeks, I am done. Last 6 chapters, last 80 pages, phenomenal. Absolutely loved this finale. Really great stuff. Climax was all handled very well, and I think similar to The Dragon Reborn, the climax was the most fleshed out, had the most space, and made the most spatial sense, generally speaking. So for a lot of reasons, these two books that are now my favorites in the series, which, spoiler alert, yeah, the Fires of Heaven is up there with The Dragon Reborn. Which one is on top, I'm still not 100% sure yet. I'll determine that more in depth once I actually review the book and actually give you a ranking placement for it. Like I'll determine it eventually. Right now is not that day, just to say it's on top. It's at those top 2 spots. Really good stuff. I really enjoyed all of this last finale. Like I said, spent about 4.5 hours reading it, totaling for 36 hours reading this whole book, which is surprisingly not a whole lot longer than I spent reading Eye of the World, which is actually a significant amount shorter than this one is, so surprised that it took that much less time. But either way, it was a good time. These last 6 chapters, again, like I said before, fantastic. Let's see if I can find where in the heck I have to actually start here for this video, because there's going to be a lot. This is probably going to be a longer video than I want it to be by a significant margin. There's not really too much that I can say for spoiler free at this point. I'm far enough into the series and this book specifically that it's a lot. But these final confrontations with a few peoples, in a couple different ways, I was not expecting to go certain directions that they did. There's some really cool stuff that happened with all of the main characters, but pretty big changes for the series, not just for Rand, but for basically everyone. There's some pretty big stuff that happened. With that being said, I might as well just get into the spoiler free or the spoiler filled and stop wasting time and actually talk about some of the things that happened. First off, I will say that I was wrong about last week's video saying that the Nynaeve and Elaine plotline was completed there. I thought that it was. For all intents and purposes, it seemed like it was. It technically wasn't. Although Elaine doesn't appear in these last 80 pages, Nynaeve and Berget do, and especially Moghedien does. We'll get into that a little bit in a bit. But first, there's plenty to talk about with Rand specifically. I'm trying to remember if Matt had anything super specific crazy going on in this section. I don't think he did. I think it was mostly just Rand stuff in the book, or for this final little bit. Basically, what I started out reading with this week was chapter 51, in which there's a little bit of still political stuff going on. This isn't quite where crap hits the fan immediately, and this isn't where everything explodes into action, but it is right before everything explodes into action. It gives you a very good sense of what this last little bit of the book is going to be doing, in that we learn through various different people in various different ways that the White Tower apparently has spies out and about that are aware of Rand, so there's some different intrigue, different informational systems going on where people know stuff that's happening, and we also learn a little bit later in what I read from Moghedien actually that the Forsaken kind of have a little bit of influence there as well, and they kind of always have because of the way they've had what's his bucket, the one really gross dark friend that's been with the Aiel and with Rand's party this whole time, and the fact that Lanfear has kind of disguised herself in this party now and again. So there obviously we knew some of these connections existed, but the White Tower apparently knows where Rand is, which is neat. So everybody else basically knows where Rand is. We also get an announcement that Morgause is dead, which I think is gaslighting on Gabriel's part specifically, and Gabriel is Raven, the Forsaken. So again, political stuff going on there. We know that Morgause isn't dead. In fact, the very last POV of the book confirms, when she escaped back in chapter 19, she's she's escaped. She's still out and about. She's still around. So like she'll reveal herself to be alive eventually at some point. I'm looking forward to see what that plot line does. That's all that happens with that POV. So like nothing really more to comment there, just that it exists, which I'm glad about, because after chapter 19 was one of my favorites, I was actually rather disappointed that we didn't get more of this somewhere. I guess it kind of made sense to do it this way, because then we could like maybe have doubts of like maybe she is actually dead, even though I thought she wasn't, and then learn that she isn't actually when all is said and done. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We know that supposedly Morghast is dead, and like this is the narrative that has been written in the world. Rand is furious by this because Morghast is Elaine's mother, and he is going to avenge her. So like he basically makes plans to immediately go to Caemlyn to hurt Robin, to kill Robin, to recompense for that. And another point that I actually forgot about from chapter 51, apparently some of the Forsaken know about Matt as well. I forgot that he even had this POV, but Melindra, his lover up to this point for most of this book, if not this entire book, I forget off the top of my head, because that happened very early on when they interacted for the first time. Melindra tried to kill Matt. Matt instead killed her, you know, saving his own life, but like that happened as well. So like there's probably some stuff going on with Matt's POV as far as some of the other Forsaken are concerned that is being built up towards. Don't know what any of that is at the moment quite yet, but you know that is something to look out for sure. Otherwise, things really hit the fan and everything explodes in chapters 52 and 53, in which Rand is about to, you know, get everybody together to go to Caemlyn so that he can kill Robin. And Lanfear instead is there at the docks and is discussing with, or speaking with, that really gross dark friend that I forgot his name. And she apparently hears from him that Rand has had some intimacy, we'll say, with Aviendha. And this makes her freak out, obviously. We knew that she was very jealous and very protective. Not protective, just very jealous of Rand up to this point because of the whole Luce Theron connection and like the past life and all of this fancy whatnot stuff going on, that like she's a very jealous person. And she freaks out at this point, causes a ruckus out at the side of the river when Rand is nearby, and like intends to kill Rand because Rand's like, no, I'm actually not yours, sorry. And she's like, okay, then you're dead. So like there's a skirmish here that I was not expecting to happen. I didn't think this was going to happen at all, and the fact that it did is just cool. So like an extra thread for the climax. And Rand very nearly dies, we'll say here. This explosion, pretty much literally actually, also very much hurts Egwene, and it hurts Aviendha a little bit. So like Egwene's basically taken out of the narrative at this point. She's too hurt to go to Caemlyn with them when this is all said and done. But Aviendha is still able to be okay. But Moiraine, this is the important point, Moiraine sacrifices herself, and she and Lanfear both die in this exchange. And so Rand, despite, you know, being perfectly capable of killing Lanfear and just not, because he still has this stupid hitch against killing women, which, to be fair, because this connection with Rand and Luce Theron has been starting to happen a little bit more in this book, more fully, like this connection was made like pretty explicitly, like the reason Rand has a hard time killing women, not just because of like moral reasons, is also because of the past life Luce Theron murdering his own family. So like there's some connection there. So like there's justification for it. I just still find it really goofy that like this person's a freaking Forsaken, just kill her. It's not that hard, and he doesn't, and this causes Moiraine to die too. So like crazy developments. This all happens and like it gets resolved, but man, chapter 53, when all of this was over, was it was a lot. I had to put the book down. Like I didn't plan to read beyond 53 anyway because I had other things that I had to do yesterday. But yeah, it was a lot. But I did continue this morning with 54 through the end. 54 is Rand getting together everybody and going to Caemlyn and like starting the assault against Robin, which there's an important point that Robin actually makes an attack that I think seems like it kills Aviendha and Asmodean, maybe even mad as well, but like there are a few people that it seems like are pretty explicitly pointed out as like they died in this attack, this assault that Raven made back as soon as they all showed up, basically. But Rand makes a point of going in and chasing Raven to kill him personally. Of course, we would expect this. What I didn't expect for this chapter was to also include more than half of it being from Nynaeve's POV, being in Tel'aran'rhiod with Swan, after Swan basically said, "You're going to teach me how to be in and like do stuff in Tel'aran'rhiod. You're going to teach me these things because you can, and because you have to teach all of the other Aes Sedai this thing." So like that happened in the last plotline. So now it's coming back. Swan and Nynaeve are in Tel'aran'rhiod. Nynaeve thinks she sees Moghedien and freaks out, basically forces Swan out of Tel'aran'rhiod, and she goes instead of coming out of the dream world herself, she ends up going somewhere else. Moghedien follows her, and like it's very nearly bad. Berget, who's watching over Swan and Nynaeve in the real world, notices that Swan like temporarily wakes up and that Nynaeve doesn't, so she enters Tel'aran'rhiod, taking the ring from Swan, and enters herself now, and saves Nynaeve from being like just absolutely destroyed by Moghedien, distracting Moghedien. Nynaeve is able to go to her and like conjure up some sort of dream world version of one of these Adams, these Shan-Chan devices that allow Channel to link and control each other. It puts the leash on Moghedien and has the bracelet on herself, and is able to restrain Moghedien this way. I love that there are these elements, these devices, these magical items in the series that allow for the balance to be turned. Like normally in a lot of stories, it's like the bad guys have all the power and like the good guys just like kind of have to deal with it and like somehow overcome somehow, and that's like it. But like in this story, this world, there are actually things that really change and twist the balance of power in ways that feel natural, without just being like Deus Ex Machina type of stuff. Instead of just like, oh, but Nynaeve was the good guy, so she was able to defeat Moghedien again. Because like that skirmish in the Shadow Rising could come across as a little bit I mean, of course we know that Nynaeve is very, very powerful with magic, up to and maybe even more so than Moghedien, but like that's restricted by the fact that she can only really channel when she's angry. But there's still something about this fact that like Nynaeve, this person who doesn't really understand her wielding of the power, was good enough to defeat Moghedien to some capacity in the Shadow Rising, something that comes across a little bit strangely. But then you realize that there are devices like this that just straight up allow for the shift in power regardless, even when being in the dream world, the control over the power isn't super strong. It's, you know, really cool stuff. Like as much as I want to complain about certain aspects of the balance of power being like inconsistent, it's like kind of not really inconsistent actually, and I really like that fact. But anyway, Nynaeve is able to take control of Moghedien. Berget disappears because of not being able to be in a deep enough sleep to remain in Tel'aran'rhiod given the circumstances. Fancy jargon that doesn't really matter that much. Nynaeve decides that she's going to take Moghedien to Caemlyn for some reason, because like she knows that that's where Raven is, that's where Rand's going, because Moghedien said as much. So she's like, okay, we're going to Caemlyn. And like Moghedien tries to say, yeah, but we can't like actually influence the real world from here, so what's the point? But Nynaeve's like, I don't care, we're going there. And I was able to predict right before it happened that, because what happened earlier in the chapter when Rand started the assault on Raven was that he's chasing Raven through halls and rooms and whatnot, like very brief moments of skirmish that kind of happen. And then he chases Raven in through some mysterious gateway somewhere that like he doesn't really know. And like there are rules that he doesn't really fully understand. He's almost changed into another person against his will and is barely able to escape that. And I just predicted right before it was revealed, like for certain, like Raven tricked Rand into entering Tel'aran'rhiod. This is why Nynaeve bringing Moghedien to Caemlyn is such an important point, because now there can be actual interaction between these two. And yeah, it was really cool for this to happen. The all of the skirmishes, all of the portions of the skirmish between Nynaeve and Rand, the way it goes back and forth between their POVs, Raven being killed by Rand with massive, intense power of balefire, which I think is an important point, because therefore, like, his sort of influence on the world is like undone to X amount of degree, which undoes his killing of Aviendha and Asmodean. If I'm understanding that correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what I got out of that, but it was really cool nonetheless. Like, Raven's now gone, and like Rand doesn't realize that the woman with Nynaeve in this moment after all the skirmish is over is Moghedien, and even if he did know, he probably wouldn't kill her anyway because he has a problem killing women. But generally speaking, this chapter 55, this whole climactic sequence in Tel'aran'rhiod, amazing. Like, this was, as opposed to my imagining a lot of events in books while I'm reading as being like movies or TV show type stuff, this sequence was like a video game to me. I was so into it in a way that I have not been into anything in the series, and I really, really loved that aspect of it. It was really cool. Rand was able to get the message that Moiraine and Lan, well, Rand was able to get the message to Nynaeve that Lan wanted to tell, that he's found someone else, that he's going elsewhere, that Nynaeve doesn't need to worry about him anymore. But Rand also basically said the same message himself as well, but for Elaine, like, tell Elaine that she doesn't need to worry about me. Like, there's this isn't going to work kind of thing. You know, kind of reflecting on some of those thoughts about whether it was actually good for Rand to, you know, chase the one that he loves, in the wake of different discussions he's had with different people. It's really good chapter. Chapter 55 was incredible. One of my favorites of the entire series. Probably my favorite of the book, actually, right next to chapter 19, which I really liked. So, like, great stuff. Very, very great stuff. At last we come to chapter 56, just a few pages long. And the general points that I can come up with are basically that I've really enjoyed watching in this book, especially Rand's rise to power and influence in the broader world has been really enjoyable to watch. Not just, you know, him commanding tiers like he has since the Dragon Reborn, since the end of the Dragon Reborn, but also like his influence over the Aiel, the way that he was able to take over Carrion in the wake of Kaladin's destruction. Now he also has a brief discussion with whoever it is from Saldea, so he has probably potential allies along most of, if not all of, the border of the world next to the Blight. So like, there's some really, really great stuff here, and it just sets up for Lord of Chaos. Lord of Chaos has the opportunity to absolutely slap just immensely. So I'm actually really looking forward to getting to Lord of Chaos here. It'll probably be a little while before that happens, though. In the wake of enjoying the Fires of Heaven so much, I kind of wish that I had actually planned out my schedule to get to these next couple books sooner than I am going to. But because of other stuff going on, I don't think I can actually shift my reading schedules enough to actually make that happen. We'll see. I might try my best to get to a couple of these a little bit sooner than I was initially planning before I started this book. But like I said, we'll see. There's no certainties there. It's probably not going to happen. Also, one final thing that I want to mention about chapter 56. Asmodean's just killed by some unnamed person. So, like, that's concerning. Wonder what's going to come out of that in the future. Very, very, very strange decision, but like actually kind of cool. After all this time with Asmodean just kind of like being on the sidelines with Rand in this book, it actually kind of makes sense to like take him out of the picture and allow Rand growth without being Asmodean just being right there the entire time. So, you know, I'm not totally against this thing, but like it came out of nowhere, I will tell you that much. But yeah, that was basically my experience with the last little bit of this book. I thought the climax was great. I thought all of this final little bit was great. I really enjoyed this book overall. There are a couple very minor complaints that I have, like Kaladin's duel with Mat not being on page. I can understand where people come from saying that the circus plotline is a little bit too long. Like, maybe it's dragged on just a few pages longer than it needs to be, but like most of that plot line took place in Tel'aran'rhiod actually, and not the circus, so I didn't have much problem. I can see the complaints that people have about Nynaeve, and potentially even Elaine being at their worst. Maybe not Elaine being at her worst in this book, but Nynaeve is said to be at her worst in this book, and I can see where people come from. I didn't struggle with that too much. I actually struggled a little bit more with Berget in her arguments with Nynaeve, a little bit more than I did with Nynaeve herself, but like, generally speaking, this book was great. I enjoyed it a heck of a lot more than I did The Shadow Rising. I'm really glad by that fact. The fact that it is a top 2 book next to The Dragon Reborn, yet to be determined which order those actually sit at, is really, really, really nice. I was worried about this one. I had multiple people telling me that, like, based off of how I felt about the first 4 books, like, I might not like this one very much. But, you know, everything just ended up working fine. Sorry to the one guy, I forget your name, the one that I've basically agreed on hand in hand, like all of our thoughts were basically the exact same through the first 4 books. He said that I probably wouldn't enjoy the Fires of Heaven very much if our thoughts together remained to be consistent, and I just love this one, so that's where our thoughts diverge, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now because I've been talking for quite a while. I'm really happy with this book. Like I said, middle of May, I think, is when my review for the Fires of Heaven will actually come out. But yeah, that is the end of this video. I will talk to you guys in the next one. I have no idea what it is off the top of my head. My mind's just still reeling from this book. So thank you for watching one more time. I'll be back in the next video.